we measure emotional energy on a self-report scale of 0 to 100, like a report card. If your emotional energy is in the 90s, you're going to have a great workout at the gym and you're going to feel great. It'd be amazing. 80s, not bad. It's a B. You're going to have good positivity. But in the 70s, you're starting to fatigue and you can feel that, but you're still on the positive side. Once you hit 70, that's the tipping point number. And as soon as you go below that, negative thinking kicks in. And a person will begin to spiral downward and just begin to feel that emotional fatigue.
Welcome to Charge Forward Coaching, the podcast for committed athletes and individuals who want to achieve more on and off the field. Hosted by James Blasco, certified mental toughness and resilience coach. You'll gain insights and inspiration from elite athletes, coaches, and others who know what it takes to excel. Are you ready to go to the next level? Then tune in, get inspired, and let's charge forward. Now here's your host, James Blasco.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Charge Forward Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, James Blasco. I am pumped about today's conversation. We're going to dive deep into the mental side of performance, and you're probably like, well, you always do that, mental toughness and stuff. But today we have Dr. Jarrod Spencer, and there's a few different reasons I'm excited to talk to him, but his name may be familiar. He's one of the top sports psychologists on the planet. He's an author, speaker. He's worked with players in the Super Bowl, the World Series, the Indy 500, the Olympics. He works with businesses around the world like Microsoft and leaders in Dubai. He's been on probably every TV show you could possibly think of. The coolest thing is he's the mind doc on NordicTrac's iFit, which I think is super cool. So Jarrod, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. I'm thrilled to be with you.
Yeah, excited and appreciate you carving out time. So I just shared a little bit of your background. Is there anything you'd like to share with the audience that maybe I left out that is pretty important in terms of your background?
Yeah, prophets never accepted in their homeland. So in my house, I've got some teens, young adults, and I'm just dorky dad, like everyone else. So that other stuff made me sound way more important than I probably am.
Well, I wanted to, before I have some big questions for you, I'm super excited to ask you, but I do have to address the elephant in the room. You are originally from Phillipsburg, New Jersey, which most people are like, no big deal. I am originally from Easton, Pennsylvania, and in high school sports, that's a pretty big deal because it's probably one of the biggest high school rivalries in the country. I think it is, at least. And when I was reading your book, The Mind of the Athlete, you wrote a personal story in there about the wrestling competition you were in against Easton. Didn't quite turn out as you had hoped, and you were an excellent wrestler and football player. And I had a similar experience in football as the starting quarterback at the Easton Peaburg game. And what I want to ask you a little bit about young athletes' mindset and how to deal with situations that are, at least at that time in their lives, that big. Because for me, it was a big deal. I walked out and there's 15,000 people. And I literally froze up. I got tunnel vision. My body changed. And the game didn't work out for me personally as I wanted it to. How do you see that often? And how do you help athletes, especially young athletes, with that?
Well, isn't that what's so great about athletics is that it's just this platform for learning life skills. And of course, when you and I grew up in that high school rivalry, which to an outsider, just so you know, it's often regarded as like top 5 largest, best rivalries in football in particular in America. So it's a lot of expectation, a lot of pressure, but from that opportunity, one can develop mental toughness, they can develop psychological insight, they can develop resiliency skills. And so I just look at that experience and others like that for everyone and say, what a great opportunity to learn some really valuable life lessons. Now, of course, some people think, well, that means the positive, but oftentimes the most valuable lessons are the ones that come that are a bit more painful.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And from that day on, it really stuck with me for quite a while, but it also, to your point, set me on a path to learn. And I wanted to better understand, not just for athletics, but in my life as a whole, how to better manage those situations and be prepared. And so it was a very positive experience from that standpoint. You talk a lot about to have the best performance and have the best health, really, to have, it's a requirement to have a clearer mind. What do you mean by that?
More specifically, I'm talking about something called the preconscious mind. It's a bit of a concept that was initially pioneered by Freud, 100 years ago, that I moved forward. It's really that back burner of the stove. By definition, it's the place in your mind where memories are stored that can easily be recalled, but they're outside of your immediate awareness. So you become aware of what's in your preconscious mind when you put your head on the pillow and you start thinking about things, or when you're driving the car, or you're out for a walk or a run. That's the preconscious mind. And when that's flooded with a lot of emotionally charged, unresolved, ongoing stressors, it's hard for us to have the emotional energy, the focus, and the performance we want. But when we emotionally solve and resolve those emotionally filled tensions that we have, our mind can be clearer. And when the mind is clearer, all the good stuff that's inside of a person can more easily flow from us, and thus the performance is better.
Makes perfect sense. And you worked with a lot of professional athletes and Olympians. What do most of those folks have they learned that? Are they just somehow inherited that ability to have a clearer mind? Or do you see that most athletes, whether they want to agree or not, they have to work on it?
They have to work on it. I mean, at the higher levels, there's no option. You have to do it. And so, sure, some people, quite frankly, I mean, they just had better parenting. And in that better parenting, I mean, like they learned communication skills at another level, or the emotional conflict resolution skills were developed at an earlier age in a better way. And so some of them come to the table with that. But if you're talking about being in the Paris Olympics, if you're talking about being in the World Series, then no matter who you are at that level, it's about skill development.
I talk a lot about mental toughness. In fact, that's what I try to focus on the most. What does mental toughness mean to you? I know you talk a lot about, and you're writing a book on emotional energy. Are there similarities there, or the same thing? What is it from your standpoint?
Oh, absolutely. I think mental toughness is a great term. It's one that's been around for quite a while. And I think when we say that term, many people understand what that means. And there's been a lot of wonderful people out there pioneering that field, like yourself and David Goggins and lots of other people that are particularly in the Navy and the Army and the SEALs kind of regime. And so there's wonderful mental toughness advocates out there. My niche is not exactly that. And what I'm talking about is more emotional health. So when we talk about mental, immediately what we think of as mental means more cognitive. When we think about emotional health, we think about like more feelings. So the feelings tend to be more emotional. The mental tends to be more cognitive, although that's not exclusive, right? Because there's certainly concentric circles that lead and overlap with those concepts. But my niche is more in the emotional health range and really focuses more on the feeling part of life, the emotionality of life. And in particular, in the whole world of EQ, which is popularized more and more these days, like I'm really driving down on the emotional energy piece. And as we understand emotional energy, we can begin to understand the correlation it has with mental toughness.
Where did you begin your passion for that niche in psychology as a whole?
It's an area that I just noticed through 20 plus years of clinical experience, but in particular, this side of the pandemic, I'm noticing a trend among leaders. And particularly I'm talking about coaches, I'm talking about CEOs, I'm talking about execs, CVPs, EVPs. I'm talking about people that on this side of the pandemic are privately saying to me, man, I'm just burning out, man. I might be in good physical shape, but I'm just tired. I'm just drained. The pace of life, the parenting or the demands with work and the schedule and the pace, they're just saying, I have this emotional fatigue and It's why teachers are leaving, teaching at a rate unlike we've ever seen before. School administrators are leaving, work in the tech world like I do at Microsoft, and you'll see people really struggling with that pace of life there. And even physicians. I've spoken at a lot of physician conferences, and they're just burning out. So what's happening there? And it's this emotional fatigue. And so since the pandemic, that really has been a theme that I've heard the most, and that's why I'm going down that path.
So to that point, I know you see rest and rejuvenation as critical in this whole process. Can you kind of walk us through, whether it's an athlete or a business person or whomever, how to best utilize rest to get your best performance?
Well, sure. It's the biggest difference between pro sports and high school, college sports, and it's also in business. In pro sports, there's a huge emphasis on rest, recharge, and recovery. Lots of science behind it. Something like as simple as a whoop. People are wearing, tracking sleep, right? Sleep is the number one factor in mental health and performance. If we don't have our sleep regulated, consistent, good quality sleep, nothing else is really going to fall into place. So we know that it starts with that. But it's so many other tools we got to pull in the toolbox. Two of the big ones that I'm a big fan of right now are just the sauna, and in particular, cold tubbing, and the importance of what a cold tub can even do for mental health and well-being. So when we begin to apply the science of rest, recharge, recovery to high performers, which isn't quite there in the grind them out high school and college environment, and also in corporate, it's pretty much a push, push, push. When we apply that to a generation like Generation X, which has a just do it attitude with no value on rest, it's incredible how we can begin to transform emotional health and performance.
Do you see, when working with athletes, whether professionals, college, even Olympians, is it widely accepted now by coaches of those teams or organizations that our athletes, they need a sports psychologist or a mental performance coach? It's just as important as our trainers or whoever else.
Yeah, the truth is absolutely. Since the pandemic, the stigma fell, right, on mental health. The first time it fell, I always mark that moment by saying that was when Naomi Osaka withdrew from the French Open. That was a shot heard around the world. And that's when I started doing like CNN and BBC and all these different networks. But then a few months later, when Simone Biles withdrew from the Olympics in Tokyo, that's when everyone said, you know what, it's okay not to be okay. I'm struggling, you're struggling, we're all struggling, and it's okay to talk about it. And since that time, nearly everybody that I interact with in all facets of life are able to say, yes, we see the value in this. The problem is that the funding's still not there. And so we see the problem, but how many dollars have been allocated to this particular area? And the answer is still not enough.
Yeah, I had a conversation with Kat Lutz. She's the head of mental performance down at IMG Academy down in Bradenton. And they have 12 mental performance coaches. I was blown away. But then other organizations and teams that really don't have any. They're really not working directly with anyone. I was surprised by that. Your new book that you're writing, Emotional Energy, number one, how close are you to finishing? Because I'm excited to read it. But what are some of the key takeaways that people will get from the book?
Well, I'm in the editing phase now, so the sooner the better. Probably by the end of the year, the advanced copies will all be out there, and I'll be excited about that. When it comes to emotional energy, that's really the fuel for better health and performance. And the first thing we need to do is understand, like, what is emotional energy? And so that's a person's psychological capacity to effectively deal with the immediate stressors right here, right now in a person's life. And we measure emotional energy on a self-report scale of 0 to 100, like a report card. If your emotional energy is in the 90s, you're going to have a great workout at the gym and you're going to feel great. It'd be amazing. 80s, not bad. It's a B. You're going to have good positivity. But in the 70s, you're starting to fatigue, and you can feel that, but you're still on the positive side. Once you hit 70, that's the tipping point number. And as soon as you go below that, negative thinking kicks in. And a person will begin to spiral downward and just begin to feel that emotional fatigue. in sports, we would say that's when an athlete broke. And you can sense it. You can tell during a game, oh yeah, that athlete broke, the other team broke, and get the backups ready. We're going to be putting them in soon. So emotional energy management, by gravitating to the people, places, and things that we love and energize us and charge us up, and avoiding those that drain us, and that's on a more simplistic scale, a simplistic way. That's the key, emotional energy management.
Is it if somebody's at 70 or below in the middle of a competition, for whatever reason, something happened and they don't manage it can they get back up to 80 or 90, or is that off the table, at least for that particular event and moment?
No, they're not getting back up to an 80 or 90. They can at best hope to get back up a little bit. But unfortunately, they might get up in the 70s, maybe take a break, maybe get some hydration, maybe some fuel, maybe a halftime. Maybe a good quality timeout, maybe a sports psychologist there getting in their ear, really trying to uplift them and applying techniques. But typically, once you get to that tipping point, it's about just trying to manage it and hang in there as best you possibly can. So then the real work begins by saying, before I even step on the court, the field, the boardroom, make sure my emotional energy then is already high enough for what I'm going to put myself through.
Going back to my experience on a football field, the East of Peterborough game.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I had never felt that before. I was a confident kid, right, and the season went well and all this kind of stuff. And I was excited for that game. But that moment was something I just wasn't prepared for. And looking back, I wish I did have that experience of talking to somebody and somebody educating me on how to manage my emotions during that time frame, because sometimes you just get that one chance, and if you're not prepared, that's it. Do a lot of the athletes and individuals you work with, when they reach out to you, is it because they know that there's something that they need to work on, or are there other people encouraging them to reach out to you?
It's a little bit of both. That somebody close to them has said, I think you could really benefit from this. And oftentimes it's somebody saying, I know a guy, and if you talk to this guy, you might find that he's the one that can help you with this. So it's very quiet. It's very person to person, but it's like the old adage, when a student is ready, the teacher will appear.
So do you see, what are the connections, the similarities, maybe differences between athletes that you've worked with and individuals in business or entrepreneurs or folks that have nothing to do with athletics, but they still want the best out of life? They still want the best performance and success they could possibly have. Are they the same, or are they a lot different when you work with them?
You know, what's interesting about my journey is that what I've learned, whether I'm in the projects or on private planes, people are people. You know, we're all just people, and we all have complex interpersonal dynamics, oftentimes with family members, extended family, in-laws, people we work with in the office, and we all have strained relationships. We all have past hurts. We all have past pains and regrets. And so people are just people. And so when you strip away the fact that somebody may be, you know, an NFL football player, you find out that they're just like you, me, and everyone else. They're just a person who has feelings and wants to feel as good as they possibly can and be the best version of themselves that they possibly can. And that thread crosses everything.
That makes perfect sense. I think sometimes we look at those individuals, especially pro athletes, because that's who people see the most on TV. And you do think they're different. They're, you know, beyond human to a certain extent, but they're not. They're really not. And they're dealing with a lot of things that everybody else is. When it comes to pressure, success, even failure, how do you work with individuals on the longevity of having that much pressure on you all the time and overcoming it, dealing with it constructively versus imploding?
You know, the key is the parasympathetic nervous system. So I'm really into neuroscience. My doctor's really in health psychology, not sport, but like health. And so the parasympathetic nervous system, if our nervous system has two parts, the sympathetic, which is what wakes you up in the morning, it's go, 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 go. And the parasympathetic, which is relax, 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 that puts you to sleep at night. And so for many high performers, they're in a sympathetic state of go, 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 go for a long period of time. And they can't sustain that forever. So we have to make sure that they can shift out of that and get the parasympathetic engaged so that the nervous system will be more in balance. And so really cultivating parasympathetic activities is really important. Now, of course, it sounds simple, but most people, when they give them a break or give them a chance to relax, they're going to lie in their bed or lie on the couch and pull out their phone and scroll, which is going to stimulate the brain and may not always be a parasympathetic experience because the brain is really firing and such. So we need to really teach them ways to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. And one of my favorite things in pro sports is to use a technique called intensive relaxation. So like, hey, look, you have one day off this week, right? And you typically get 4 days off in a month, and whenever they fall, they fall. But if you have one day, like you want to squeeze in as much intensive relaxation as you possibly can. So it may look like, you go to the hot tubs, the cold tubs, the steam rooms, the saunas, you're going to get a massage, you're going to get a nap, you're going to spend quality time with a loved one. All these things that a person could pack in so that in one day, it's all very parasympathetic. So it can help reset the nervous system so they can have longevity.
Yeah, I can see how that could be extremely important. The phones, don't get me started. We could have a whole podcast just on how phones are impacting everything. It's and I'll, pointing one finger at everybody and three back at me, but it's challenging. You brought up neuroscience. How much in the way of the advancements in neuroscience, the things that we're learning, are playing a role in how you work with your clients?
A lot. For example, we used to think that so much of mental health in particular was in the brain. And what we've learned now is it's also largely in the gut. And if we understand the gut microbiome, if we understand what we eat impacts how we feel, and we understand the serotonin is often manufactured largely in the gut, we understand that we can feel better if we pay more attention to what is actually going into our bodies. That's one small example of the shift of high performance and some neuroscience that can help an individual feel better.
Yes, and you hear a lot about that nowadays, and most people are like, I didn't have any idea that your gut and your mind were connected like that. Before we wrap up here, what advice would you share with anyone? In particular, I talk a lot with younger athletes and their parents. What advice would you give them in terms of starting their journey on their mental health, improving mental health and improving performance? If there's one or two things they could start to do now, what would you recommend?
Well, it's all really about EQ, right? We know that EQ is more important than IQ when it comes to leadership. Leadership is predicated upon somebody has the emotional skills to manage the pressure cooker they find themselves in. And so when I think about EQ, I think about it in terms of two parts. One is the outside in head knowledge. I'd ask them, like, what podcasts are you listening to? What YouTube videos are you watching? What book are you reading? But how are you feeding your mind constantly so you can develop the skills? But that's only 50% of it. The other 50% is the outside, or rather the inside out learning process. Know thyself. And that's really going to come from one-on-one individual counseling, coaching with somebody. And as you begin to look inside and you begin to understand your thoughts and your feelings and your actions, then you can have deeper psychological insight. So when you have greater psychological insight and you pair that with broader self-awareness of what's going on around you, that leads to better judgment, right? And then we would thus see that as a higher EQ. And so I would tell every person out there, no matter who they are, to get in some good quality one-on-one coaching, counseling. It's very important. The reason why I often say is because it's the Albert Einstein quote where he said, a problem can never be solved at the level of consciousness for which it was created, right? So I'm a psychologist and I can help you with your problems, but I need to go see my psychologist to help me with my problems because to a certain degree, I've created them in my own mind, right? And when I talk to my psychologist, he sees it from a different perspective, and thus I'm able to help solve and resolve and grow and develop with that outside perspective. So the inside out learning process is critical, but you got to combine that with the outside in as well. When I hear somebody putting those two together, particularly for somebody young, I'm very optimistic about how they're going to be able to handle life's challenges moving forward. It's one of the best things we can do for ourselves.
Yeah, I agree 100%. That's just excellent feedback. So, Dr. Spencer, thank you so much for being on the podcast. How can people get in touch with you, learn more about you, understand all the expertise that you have to offer?
Well, on all the socials, right, that are out there, it's Dr. Jarrod Spencer. That's Jarrod. And of course, the main website is drjarrodspencer.com, DRJARROD Spencer, SPNCER.com.
Great. Everybody, you better go there, learn more about Dr. Spencer. It's going to be well worth it. Even though he's from Pittsburgh, it's going to be well worth it. And don't forget to like and share and subscribe and all that good stuff. If you want to learn a little bit more about mental toughness too, you go to chargeforwardcoaching.com. Happy to share information, but most of all, just keep charging forward.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Charge Forward Coaching. Remember, the journey to greatness is built on mental toughness and consistent effort. So head on over to chargeforwardcoaching.com and book a free discovery call to take the next step in your journey. Until next time, stay focused, stay determined, and keep charging forward.